We know the industry is famous for saying there's no evidence of harm. And they're right, because there is no evidence. No long-term human studies have ever been conducted, no prenatal studies, no pediatric studies. So we don't know what the long-term effects, what the long-term toxicity effects, any of this might be. And so, really what we've got is a situation where we have introduced something into the marketplace without any pre-market safety testing done by the FDA.
It's not just GMOs, but it's also the chemicals that are being applied in ever-increasing quantities. With genetically engineered corn and soy and all these other wonderful wonders of modern science, there's good science and bad science, the chemical is not on the outside, it's actually in the product. They've engineered a pesticide right into the corn, right into the sugar beets, right into the wheat or whatever else it is that they're going to genetically modify. And you're consuming that.
Well, basically, chemical monoculture is just the wrong approach. You're trying to force something on nature, and nature's fighting back. And so there's weeds, and, it keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps coming. And weed resistance is a big deal now in chemical agriculture. So chemical agriculture is all about feeding the plant and getting maximum yield, and the heck with the soil, and the heck with all the long-term effects. So it's just a different outlook, and our system gets better every year, and their system gets worse every year.
There's a decision in front of the Secretary of Agriculture to approve or disapprove a 2,4-D resistant corn. This is a corn that had its genes manipulated to be resistant so that so farmers can use more 2,4-D. And the reason this is necessary is glyphosate is no longer, Roundup is no longer effective. We believe that we're crossing a Rubicon here. We believe that our government sanctioning a crop that is absolutely going to result in an increased use of a chemical that we know to be hazardous is virtually it's an immoral behavior.
In light of the fact that no long-term human studies have been conducted, no toxicity studies have been conducted to assess what the impact of these foods and the chemicals that are being applied to them might be on a developing baby. Unfortunately, our children have earned the title of Generation RX because of how sick they have become. Whether we're talking about diabetes or obesity or allergies or asthma or autism, or the fact that cancer is now the leading cause of death by disease in children under the age of 15 in the United States, that is a fundamental truth that parents today know. And it's challenging more than how we feed our children and how we read labels. It's challenging, I think, fundamentally the way that we think about our children, healthcare, and how we're going to address this going forward.
I'm the doctor that you want to have out of business, because I'm the one that has to treat your baby with a birth defect, a premature baby, a baby that's ill in any way. And to the extent that my business is growing is really bad news for the human race. We've realized that the chemicals that are in every pregnant mother today are new. They weren't there. In a human race, never saw them before. About 1940, my mother was the last generation of women that wasn't fully saturated with the 15,000 chemicals that we can now measure in virtually every pregnant mother. This is what we need to ask ourselves as a society. If we can't assign the outcome of pregnancy as the most important thing, then we're doomed. We can't ever hope to expect those people who attend a stakeholders meeting to represent the real people. The stakeholders are pregnant mothers and their infants and their fetuses. They don't have billions of dollars. They just have a fetus.
We can't say that these crops are necessarily harmful or not, but we absolutely can say that we're using a whole lot more chemicals as a result. And unfortunately, we have no idea what the cumulative impacts are of long-term exposure to these chemicals. We have no idea what the synergistic effects are. What happens when you combine breathing 2,4-D with breathing glyphosate with being exposed to more pesticides. And we absolutely have no idea what the impacts are on children at the time of maximum cell reproduction. At the same time, we see cancer rates on the rise. And certainly, while chemical use is not the only causality, the President's Cancer Panel nevertheless said it's the primary one.
We haven't done the research on these things. We see a lot more animal diseases than we ever had before. So we haven't done that work. How can somebody say that because we haven't done the work, it proves that it's safe? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I would say there is actually suggestive evidence that some of these engineered foods could be problematic. I think there's evidence, for example, for the Bt crops. There's evidence that some of the delta endotoxins that are engineered into plants, particularly Cry1AB and 1AC, are allergens and immunogens.
So, again, correlation is not causation. Just because we've introduced genetically engineered proteins into our food supply does not necessarily mean that those are the proteins that these children are having an allergic reaction to. The industry, once again, would say there's no evidence of harm, and they're right. There's absolutely no evidence, because if any parent were to walk into an allergist's office and say, I want you to tell me if my kid's allergic to genetically engineered soybeans or soybeans that have been served for thousands of years, we don't have that test. There's no way to differentiate in the testing, and so again, we don't have any of those answers. So again, industry is able to say there's no evidence of harm. The fact is there is no evidence.
Our bodies aren't meant to process chemicals because we're not made up of chemicals. It's a natural environment in here. When you put unnatural things in, it has to be stored in the liver, or it goes into different parts of your cells, and it creates disease later on, because our bodies are just pretty simplistic and designed to have good, healthy nutrition. I'm constantly shocked by people who think they're healthy that don't even know what a GMO is, and I just think that we need to take a step back from this expansion and really decide what's the future.
Well, this is a monumental legacy to the way we make food and molecules. And it could be, it might have been a really great thing to discover, but if that also means then that you can't make corn and not make pesticides in the current model. See, that's the part that was left out. We've chosen not to measure the pesticides that make corn. That's not fair. That's not right. It's not morally sound.
To understand that what we could be doing here is sanctioning our citizenry and our environment to a essentially self-administered prescription for cancer. This is not preventative health care. This is expediting health problems. Maybe it makes these companies some money in the short term. Maybe it helps some farmers in the short term. But what's the point if it sentences us to shorter lifetimes and trillions of dollars of cancer treatments? The most expensive form of health care is getting sick. The cheapest form of health care is not getting sick. Why would we want to sanction an increased use of a chemical that is likely, not possibly, likely to be causing harm?
We have the right to know where it comes from, how it was produced, what's been added to it. It's the bottom line. Whether these products are safe or not, we have the right to know what's been added to them and how they were produced.
Genetically engineered food needs to be labeled so that the American consumer has the choice of making the decision whether they want to feed genetically engineered food to their families or not. These are basic, foundational requirements in a democracy, and to short-circuit this by denying people information, it's anti-democratic.
I'm involved more so because I believe in this country, and this is not a fair game that's going down. It's a game that's corrupt, and so that motivates me to do this.
But I'm optimistic because then the reality has to come to light. Something will change because we have no other choice. There are too many people being sick with chronic disease all around the world. The real problem is that do we will go fast enough for our kids?
We're saying this needs to be a national conversation. But the problem is, because these companies are so powerful, so wealthy, they have so much money, these biotech/chemical companies have spent roughly $600 million on lobbying since the introduction of these crops, and God knows how much they've spent on campaign donations. We have a very one-sided system here where the citizen has really been left out of the process. Our simple ask is that government remember that it's of, for, and by the citizens, not of, for, and by a handful of chemical companies.